Hi everyone, welcome back to Beyond Borders Careers. Today we're diving into an essential topic for anyone considering working abroad: visas, work permits, and taxes. So let's get started. Now, first thing, need to make sure you understand what a visa is. A lot of people don't understand. What is a visa? Well, a visa is an official document that allows you to enter and stay in a foreign country for a specific period of time. It's crucial for legal entry and residency. And there's many different types of visas. If you're going for work, that's different than if you're going as a tourist. So there's work visas. That's typically what you're going to need if you're going over for a job, a work visa. There's also resident visas. Maybe you're bringing your spouse with you or significant other, and you'll have a work visa, they will have a resident visa. A resident visa is typically not allowed to work, but in some countries they are. You just have to research the specific requirements for that specific country. There's also student visas. These are typically just issued for a student who's been accepted at a university or a college or a trade school in that foreign country. That school sponsors them. They get a student visa. And in some cases, if you're on a student visa, you can work. Not always, but in some cases. You just have to do your research. There are also business visas. A business visa is different than a work visa. A business visa is typically for a shorter period of time. A lot of times these would be issued if you're going to a foreign country to attend a conference, a seminar, a trade show, something like that. Or if you're just a business person who's going to a foreign country trying to sell or do business development for your employer back in the United States. So that's a different thing. I've had a business visa before that was good for a year, but I could only stay in the country I had the business visa for 30 days maximum. So that would mean that if you were working full time and you had a business visa, technically you're illegal, but as long as you left and came back, that would start the clock over again. Different rules, different requirements. There's also official visas. Those would be like for some sort of government business that you're conducting overseas, and also diplomatic visas. Typically aren't going to apply for your average person who's not a diplomat, but it could. And in some cases, like for instance here in Lebanon, where I am now, I'm on a diplomatic visa. And in some countries, you could be on a diplomatic visa, your spouse could be on a diplomatic visa also, and in that particular country, depending on the agreement, your spouse may be able to work. So it just varies from country to country. But it's important to understand the difference between them. So how do you apply for a visa? How do you get a visa? Well, the first step that I usually do is I do a visa search. Okay, I need a visa for Saudi Arabia. You do it, and it'll come up. There's a website. It'll be through the government. Like if you're in the United States and that country has an embassy in the United States, that embassy will have a visa, will have a website. And it'll have all the details in there on how you get a visa. Typically, there's a form that you can download and fill out. In some cases, it can be emailed in. Some cases, it has to be delivered by FedEx or DHL or UPS or mailed. One of those types of situations. Usually, there's a fee involved. And usually, you have to have a photograph. Usually, you have to have a copy of your passport. And other, maybe an offer letter from your employer. There's the requirements will be listed out, but they're all reasonable items that you have to have. Now, if you're going to work for a legitimate company, particularly if you're going to work at a management level position or some kind of professional job, your employer is going to help you with this. A lot of times there'll be somebody at their corporate office who specializes in visas. So you don't have to figure it out for yourself. They'll walk you through it. And there's also, if you do a Google search, there are many for-profit companies in the U.S. that are visa assistance services or visa services. These companies, for a fee, normally around $100, $200, you let them know, okay, I need a work visa or a tourist visa or whatever kind of visa for this country, and they'll take care of everything for you. In many cases, they'll actually go down to the embassy with your application and physically hand the documents over to a person at the counter. And in some cases, the visa will be issued immediately. Some cases, maybe you gotta come back the next day or the day after, and the visa's been in the passport, and then they'll mail you the passport back. The visas are usually just a stamp or a sticker applied to one of the blank pages in your passport. And that's another requirement for a visa. Most countries will require your passport to have at least 6 months of validity left on it when the visa is issued. In some cases, 6 months left on it from arrival into that country. And most countries will not issue that visa, if the passport's damaged or mutilated in any kind of way, that sort of thing. They all have specific requirements, but it's good if you're going to work overseas and you're not going to be back in the U.S. for a while. Go get yourself a brand new passport and start from anew, and then you don't have to worry about it. Now, on top of visas, sometimes there's work permits. And similar to a visa, usually these are like a separate ID card. Like it looks like a driver's license or something. And they're issued by once you're there, you have to, if you're stopped by the local police or local authorities and they want to see an ID, they want to see that, that you have some kind of legal right to be there. So you have this ID card that says you're a resident. And a work permit's basically just a legal authorization that says you're allowed to work in a foreign country. It's essential that you have one if it's required in that country. Not all. Like in the U.S., they call it a green card. It's just a card that allows you to work. That way, they don't have to carry their passport around all the time. And it's in some cases you get the work visa first in your passport, and then when you arrive, then the process starts for your work permit or the ID card or residency permit or whatever that particular country calls it. But typically, the steps involved, there's a job offer. Usually it's on the employer's web letterhead, which involves an employer sponsorship and an application process. But in some countries, this may involve hiring a local attorney. There's specialized attorneys that help with this. And in many cases, your employer will pay for this or should pay for this. But, just remember, you got to have, to attain the work permit, you have to have the job offer from the employer, which may be a foreign employer or a U.S. employer who's licensed to do business in that country, who will sponsor your application, and the process varies from country to country. But all this is typically available online for that particular country. And now, that's about all I have to say about visas and work permits. I want to get into taxes. Now, first of all, I am not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a tax expert by any means, but I have paid a lot of taxes. So I'm not giving you specific advice on any particular tax situation. I'm speaking in general terms. I do encourage you, if you're in this situation and you're going to go work abroad, that you hire a local accountant or tax attorney in the United States who specializes in foreign income taxes and the foreign income tax exemption in the United States. It's not real common for Americans to work abroad, so these people are available. Just find them. Every city has some, and their prices are usually reasonable and it's worth it. But typically when you go work abroad, like this happened to me when I worked in Qatar, local taxes are required. Like there's the Qatari government taxed my salary. Now, it was an American company I was working for, so as a benefit, they paid these taxes for me, which is not uncommon. If you're working for an American company overseas, they paid the taxes for me and provided me documentation that these taxes had been paid. And so this benefit did not even show up on my W-2 or W-4 form. So when I filed my federal income tax return in the United States, it was not really an issue. And that's normal, but if you do have to pay taxes overseas, that's deductible or a credit on your federal return, depending on the situation. But your accountant or attorney can help you with that situation. But you should never have to pay double tax on the same income. But once you file your income tax in the United States, there's a foreign income tax exemption where this varies from year to year. It goes up over time. But the first so many dollars that you earn, it's a pretty high amount, is untaxable. And then you pay taxes beyond that. However, there's some key hurdles you have to meet to meet that requirement. First of all, you have to establish a tax home in a foreign country. The IRS is just not going to take your word for it that you've established this tax home. You have to establish that in some kind of way, showing you may need documentation such as proof from your employer that you're working overseas, proof that you have a place to live overseas, proof that you've been over there a while, and you have to be in this foreign country, or I should say, you have to be away from the United States for 330 days, a year. And so just check on this. So you have the documentation about when you were in the United States and when you were overseas. It's very important that you keep this up. You need to keep a diary showing the exact dates you leave and come back, because travel days don't count. I would keep boarding passes, flights, hotels, receipts on rents, anything like that. Your Uber/taxi receipts to and from the airport. All these can provide good documentation on when you left the U.S. and when you return to the U.S. Because you got to remember, when you leave the U.S. and go overseas, nobody in the U.S. stamps your passport saying you left. So there's no no stamp in your passport attesting to the fact on which day you left the U.S. So you have to keep that by some other means. Now, most foreign countries, when you arrive, will stamp your passport with the date or give you some other documentation to show that you can use for proof on when you arrived in that foreign country. So, but like I said, I would recommend having a U.S. attorney and an attorney in a foreign country you're working in if needed. So that's all I'm going to really say about taxes. But the main point I'm trying to make is get professional advice and don't rely on my advice, because I'm not a tax professional. I'm a taxpayer. I've paid a lot of taxes and I try to avoid it the best I can. And I haven't gotten any trouble with taxes, but I do my best to try to avoid them. So let's recap. To wrap up, remember that thoroughly research the requirements for a visa and work permits in the country that you're going to. They're all very similar, but they're all very different too. So just make sure you comply with the laws. You don't want to go in one of these foreign countries and get in trouble for overstaying a visa or working without a visa or a work permit if it's required. Understand your tax obligations and make sure your taxes are paid. Don't pay a penny more than what you owe, but make sure you pay what you owe. And seek professional advice if needed. And in my advice, it typically is needed. Working abroad can be an incredible experience, and being well prepared will help you make the most of it. Now, I encourage you, if you got any value out of this video or any of my other videos, please like, give me a thumbs up, ask me a question. I got more videos coming, and I would appreciate any more ideas you may have for a future video. And please subscribe, because there's more coming. And I really thank you for watching, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.